Drew, let's get to it. The one-man wrecking crew. And if you were watching college football on Saturday, you could not take your eyes off of the one-man performance. Ohio State, Penn State, JT Tuimoloau. Wow, the number 2 player in the class of 2021, according to 24/7 Sports, the number 1 defensive lineman. Drew, let me read out this stat line to you. 6 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, a deflection that resulted in an interception, and 2 INTs, one of them being a pick 6 to seal the game. Let me follow this up and say this is the only player in Ohio State history to record 2 INTs, 2 sacks, force a fumble, and recover a fumble in a game. Also, this same individual stat line has been achieved by Ohio State's defense 8 times since 1976. I mean, I can't even begin to process what we've seen. And you see our guy Dave Biddle here talking about what he saw from JT Tuimoloau. Andrew, try to put this into words, what we saw on Saturday, if you can. I know this is a pretty tough task, but I've never seen anything like it.
Oh, it's one of a kind type of performance. And really, I go back to JTT's recruitment, man. This is one that stretched all the way down the distance. I remember when he announced, I was sitting with Brandon Huffman coming off the Elite 11, and like the Elite 11's always in the summer, and this was a kid that his recruitment was still open, and a guy on the West Coast, I'm all the way in Florida, where practically on other parts of the country, and you're like, oh, what's the big deal? Well, I just saw what the big deal was over the weekend. And Cooper, I wanted to ask you, correct me if I'm wrong here, when JTT was going through this whole process, you were on staff at Washington. Wasn't he a big priority for you guys? Any insight into that whole process and how it all went down?
He was the biggest priority for us. Obviously I worked there under Chris Peterson in 18 and 19, and JTT was the guy that we had circled. That was the one guy you had to keep in state, and we knew it was going to be a head-to-head battle with Ohio State. I think after Chris Peterson decided to retire, that's where Washington really started to fade. But I think Ohio State did a really good job. They went in the state of Washington the year before. They went and got G. Scott Jr., who was on Ohio State's roster right now, was a guy highly recruited out of Eastside Catholic, the same school that JTT went to in high school as well. The following year, Larry Johnson, there goes that man again. He ends up going into the state of Washington, getting the number 1 pass rusher in the country. And then they go into Washington and they get Emeka Egbuka. That is Brian Hartline, the same guy that I mentioned earlier in the show, 2 of the best position recruiters in the country. So Ohio State having massive success in the state of Washington. Drew, I don't know how different that would have been if Chris Peterson was still at the helm. Maybe a 50-50 shot at best. But to me, Drew, I think both those guys made the right decisions. Both those guys probably going to end up being early day 1, day 2 NFL draft picks.
Yeah, and I'll say this on JTT. I only had an opportunity to see him once in person, and that was him playing 7-on-7 for FSP. Coop, I'm sure you're very familiar with FSP. He's on the same team as Keely Ringo. They were out there in Tampa at the Adidas National Championship, and this guy is playing tight end. He's 6'3", 250 pounds. He's running around like he's a 180-pound slot receiver making plays, and it was just super impressive. You could see the body coordination, how they're able to change directions and redirect. And, we always talk about, it's 7-on-7, it's shirt and shorts, but just seeing a big body like that move around, that translates to when these guys get to the next level. And, you saw JTT making those interceptions, forcing turnovers. He's a difference maker up front. And when we use the term difference maker, think of that, JTT. So awesome performance for him.